Okay, so the plasma, what it does, the plasma is made up of water majoritarily. You can see that in the slide, it is almost up to 98% of water. Sorry, 92% of water, and the rest of it is 7% plasma proteins, and then less than 1% is regulatory proteins, and then you have other solutes like ions like sodium, potassium, etc. So what we have to remember with respect to plasma is the plasma proteins are three types. One is albumins, globulins, and fibrinogens. And then in globulins, we come across three types: alpha globulins, beta globulins, and gamma globulins. And here in the globulins, we have gamma globulins, which help in the immune response. So this is something which we have to remember. So it was a long session, and unfortunately you guys were missing in the session. So just look at the slide, and you might feel that, okay, I will have doubts in certain areas. Please note it down. Whenever we have early classes, if you're left with 10 minutes, 15 minutes in the last session, you can ask me the questions. Okay, so that was about plasma. Okay, now coming to formed elements. What are formed elements? All the cellular parts. For example, you have red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. Okay, and next we talked about how the blood components are formed, or how the cells of the bloods are formed. So in our blood, we can see many different types of components such as platelets, are erythrocytes, which are also called as red blood cells, basophils, neutrophils, and eosinophils, which together we call it as white blood cells. And then we have another immune cells called as monocysts, natural killer cells, T lymphocytes, and B lymphocytes. So all these cells originate from the same cell that we discussed, which is called as hematopoietic stem cells. So these are called as hematopoietic stem cells. Hematopoiesis means formation of blood, formation of blood. And stem cells are special cells. Why? Because, see, they are one cell which can become different types of cells. See, when we started from here, it's only one cell. But when we get to the bottom, it is platelets, red blood cells, white blood cells, and so many different types, isn't it? So that is why we call it as stem cells. And one of the major characteristic features of the stem cells is totipotency. I'll just write it here. It is called as totipotency. Sorry. Potency. So totipotency means that's what they can divide, or they can increase their number and differentiate. Differentiate means they can specialize their roles. So the same cell, the same hematopoietic stem cells. What did I tell about hematopoiesis? Formation of blood cells. Hemato means blood. Poiesis means formation. So hematopoiesis, blood component formation, stem cells. So they're one cell. And as they divide and differentiate, they can give rise to white blood cells, red blood cells, T lymphocytes, B lymphocytes, as well as platelets, okay, which are the formed elements of your blood. Now, if you look at this formation of blood, multipotent stem cells, they are of two types. They divide into two different types. One is myeloid stem cells, other one is lymphoid stem cells. What you have to remember is, when it comes under myeloid stem cells, which are the cells that are formed because of myeloid stem cells? One is platelets. Next one is our red blood cells, and basophils, neutrophils, eosinophils, and monocytes. All of these cells are coming under the category of myeloid stem cells. Whereas coming to the lymphoid stem cells, you have to remember this so well. One is NKC cell. What is happening? Oh, hold on, it's just slipping, people. Okay, one is NKC cell. Okay, NKC cell is also called as natural killer cells. And then other one is also called as T lymphocyte cells and B lymphocyte cells. So in this slide, we have to remember which cells belong to which mother cells. If I ask you red blood cells, you should tell myeloid stem cells. If I ask you basophil, neutrophil, eosinophil, you should tell myeloid stem cells. If I tell you about natural killer cells, definite question, natural killer cells is lymphoid stem cells. Are you following me, students? I know it's hard, but this is what we discussed in the last class. All right. So we also talked about what are the different elements that help in the formation of blood cells. So when it comes to the elements that help in the formation of blood cells, we call it as hematopoietic growth factors. Hematopoiesis, I told you, formation of blood factors. Growth factors means somebody has to tell these cells like myeloid stem cells or lymphoid stem cells to form a specific cell. So how do they form red blood cells? Or who asked them to form white blood cells? So this is a question mark, isn't it? So these are special proteins which go and give a signal to your body for the production of a specific cell. For example, we have an erythropoietin as a factor. Erythropoietin as a factor. Erythropoietin is a blood factor which is produced in kidneys. So they help in the formation of red blood cells, or they tells your stem cells to form red blood cells. Now coming to thrombopoietin. Thrombopoietin, again, it helps in the formation of platelets. Then cytokinins, these help in the formation of white blood cells. You see? So they are just factors that help our cells to tell them what cells number or what cell type are required according to our body condition. Okay. So whenever you talk about growth factors or hematopoietic growth factors, one of the two important questions, see, all these three important things are very, very important. One is erythropoietin, thrombopoietin, and cytokinins. So when I talk about erythropoietin, it is red blood cells. If we talk about thrombopoietin, it is formation of platelets. If we talk about cytokinins, it is a formation of immune cells or WBCs. All right, students. Okay. So this is a column that explains you all the varieties. Then we went on to understand about the structure of RBC and what is the key component of RBC, which you call it as a hemoglobin. So in hemoglobin, we have a specialized protein. In red blood cells, we have a specialized protein called as hemoglobin. And hemoglobin, you might have heard about hemoglobin in your primary classes, right? So what do you talk about hemoglobin? You tell that hemoglobin is a pigment that helps in carrying the oxygen. So what is hemoglobin? It's a protein. Okay. What is hemoglobin? It's a protein. So when you talk about protein, protein is made up of peptide chains. Okay. Protein is made up of peptide chains. So if I look at the hemoglobin protein, they are made up of 4 different types of peptide chains. So these peptide chains are named as alpha chain, and beta chain. Okay. So these 4 chains of polypeptide chains or amino acid chains, they come together to form one structure, which you call it as a globular protein. So this hemoglobin, they have a functional center, which you call it as a heme group, which is a cofactor. So this heme group is associated with iron, which helps in attaching the oxygen molecules with it. Okay. So this is about hemoglobin. Now coming to the white blood cells, we saw that the white blood cells can be classified into 2 major categories. One is granulocytes and agranulocytes. Granular leukocytes or granulocytes, what we call it as, they are having, if you look at this picture, you can see that they have a kind of a spherical bodies in the center of the cytoplasm. So these we call it as granules. Since when we observe it in the microscope, these granules look very, what do you tell? You can see it very clearly. That's why we call them as granulocytes. Under granulocytes, what you have to remember here, students, if the option is given, granular leukocytes include what cells? You should tell neutrophils, eosinophils, and basophils. If a question is asked, what are the types of cells that come under agranular leukocytes? You have to tell it is monocytes, macrophages, and lymphocytes. We will talk about monocytes, macrophages, and lymphocytes today. And yesterday, we talked about the granular leukocytes and their characteristics. Let's take a small look at it. If I talk about granular leukocytes, which includes basophils, eosinophils, and neutrophils, so they have a very short lifespan. They can last up to a few hours to a few days. Now, if I look at the cells under the microscope, their nucleus is lobed. When I say lobed nucleus, if I draw a structure of cell, if I ask you to draw a structure of a cell, what do? You just write cells and then put a nice spear which is representing the nucleus. Correct? No, students. But if I look at the nucleus of these cells, they are actually in the form of lobes. Lobes in the sense, if there is a nucleus and if there is a dentation in the nucleus that shows a different morphology, so we call this as a lobe of a nucleus. So the granulocytes, what they represent is, the key characteristics of these is having a lobe nucleus. So that is one key characteristics that help us identify. All right. So based on how they react to the stains, we have classified them as basophils, neutrophils, eosinophils. So let's talk about neutrophils to start with. Neutrophils, they react with neutral stain, so it's given here, okay, and they make up to 50 to 70% of all WBCs. So if they ask you what is the highest number of leukocytes we have, that is neutrophils. The other name of neutrophils is also called as PMNC. What is called as
Sir,
PMNC? Yeah.
sir,
Tell me. Yes, yes, yes.
excuse
Please.
me.
Yeah, please tell me. I'm here.
Can you tell me what chapter?
Can you repeat?
What chapter?
Should I repeat?
À, sư thầy lâu.
Um,
Sir,
yes, I'm here.
now which chapter we are studying?
We are
In
talking about
chapter 10.
yes. Body
Chapter
fluids and
10.
it's body fluids and circulation. Are you following me?
Yeah.
Yes. It is circulation chapter, which is the third chapter of human physiology, the last unit of your biology subject. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
I expected a different question, but not the name of the chapter. Anyway, students, it's perfect. Yeah. See, I know that this is going very fast because we finished this much part, okay? And since you guys are visiting the class for the first time, I thought, okay, this is what we spoke about in the last class, and now we will discuss about today's class, okay? So before we go into today's topic, I thought we will just revisit what we spoke in the last class. Is that okay? Vinny?
What?
Yeah. Is that okay?
Okay.
Yeah.
Guys.
Yeah. Perfect. All right. So I know
Hmm.
that you it might be very difficult for you. Yeah. Can you please mute, Vinny? Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So today, see students, you just have to revise these three things. One is neutrophils, eosinophils, and basophils. All right. So if you would read these three slides, then we are good to go with today's topic. Now, I'll start from here only so that it is slow and you can understand what I'm talking about. Okay. So when I talk about A granular, A means no. Granular means I told you that in the cells there are small bodies that are floating in the cytoplasm. So they are not much granular. So or they don't have. Okay. So if I look at A granular leukocytes, let us say that I have a microscope. I look into the microscope and look at some cells. If I look at some cells, what do I see is one cell looks like this, and other cell they have nucleus. They also have nucleus, something like this. But in this one, the granules are very small. Students, you see, you cannot just give credit for having granules. They are very small granules or very less visible granules. That is why we call it as agranular WBCs, which even I didn't understand why it stopped. Okay, chalo. So we're talking about lymphocytes. So I told you that lymphocytes are formed because of lymphoid stem cells, and they're formed in bone marrow, right? And they go on mature in different lymphoid tissues. So we'll understand how they mature and how they function in the later sessions in the 12th class. So, but it's okay. But if you see, they constitute about 20 to 30% of the leukocytes, that is WBCs. There are three types of lymphocytes. One is natural killer cells, B cells, and T cells. Okay. Now, what are natural killer cells? Most of the questions in the NEET come from this particular part, natural killer cells. Natural killer cells are, see, some kind of, just imagine an amoeba, okay? So these amoeba, which can squeeze and can go and catch the prey and how it digests, similarly, the natural killer cells function the same way. What these cells do in our body is, whenever you have an injury, whenever you fall down, you have an open wound where the blood is coming out. Now this area is where the pathogens like bacteria or anything can enter into your body. If these natural killer cells recognize, they don't care whether it is fungi, whether it is bacteria, whether it is dust, whether it is some other thing, they don't care. All they do is they just go and they remove these unwanted things out of your body. That is why we call it as no specific antigen. No specific means they do not identify. The antigen means foreign. Okay, foreign or outside. Anything from outside, they don't care. So they don't know which they're what they're attacking. Anything they think that it is from outside, they just attack and they kill. Example, they attack uh, uh, mm, cancer cells or the cells that are infected with viruses, etc. Okay, so in general, what do? They participate in non-specific immunity. You know what is non-specific immunity, right? Non-specific means they don't know what they're attacking, but immunity means defense. Okay, what is it? Immunity, defense. What is defense? Protection against who? Something that is from outside, like anything, like how we said, cancer cells or virus infected cells. So these are called as foreign cells or antigens. Okay, so this is about natural killer cells. Now, uh, when it comes to B cells and or B lymphocytes, see, B cells or B lymphocytes are generally called as plasma cells. So plasma cells are the ones which produce something called as antibodies. So antibodies, you might have heard about antibodies. So they will tell, somebody will tell, okay, I need some antibiotics when I get an infection. Correct, right? So whenever we fall down and then our wound is infected and there is pus formation, and then you get a fever and chills, so you go to the doctor and get a penicillin, an injection. So which we call it as antibiotics. But here the name is antibodies. Anti means against, bodies are something which are from outside. So what are antibodies? Antibodies are nothing but proteins. Okay, they are nothing but proteins. We'll study about antibodies in the later session very detailedly. Antibodies, another name is proteins, or they're also called as immunoglobulins. So, what do these immunoglobulins do is they have an exceptional capacity. What they do is they help our body to identify what is that specific foreign thing that is entering in our body. So, for example, it might be bacteria, it might be virus, it can be fungi. So, our body need to understand what enemy it is fighting. If you know your enemy, you will fight better. Or if you just blindly attack your enemy, you cannot defeat your enemy sometimes. But immunoglobulins or antibodies, what they do is they go and stick to these foreign material and they help our body to recognize this foreign material or antigens, okay, so that our body can defend itself very successfully. So this type of immunity where our antibodies recognize something which is from outside and it will help in killing it or neutralizing it, it is also called as humoral immunity. Okay, so there are two types of immunity: cell mediated and humoral immunity. So B lymphocytes or B cells are also called as plasma cells. Okay, they produce antibodies, they participate in humoral immunity. Okay, so where are these B cells mature? B cells mature in bone marrow. Okay, now what about T lymphocytes? T lymphocytes, whenever your cells are exposed to pathogens like anything, for example, when you eat something, when you breathe something, or when your body is exposed to some injuries, now what happens is, okay, your body, okay, whenever there is an exposure, these T lymphocytes are formed. Why they are formed? They are formed based on the memory. So for example, in your younger age you might get a lot of infections such as diarrhea, you might have fevers or cold. But as you've grown up, the amount or the times that you fall sick is reduced as you have grown up. The reason is your body has built a memory. So these memory cells are one of types of T cells and the B cells which help in produce a specific type of T cells when they are exposed. Okay. So, for example, if you get the first infection of a bacteria, your body will take a lot of time to neutralize any of these infections. But as the time moves on, your body will be able to fight it faster and faster. Correct, right? So this is called as okay, specified immunity, and they are formed when they are exposed repeatedly. Example is vaccines. So as you are given more and more exposure to these, our T cells, what they do is they build a better memory, and these cells help in destruction of these antibodies. And the next type of WBC is monocytes. So remember, these monocytes are originate from myeloid stem cells. Okay, 2 to 8% of the WBCs are made up of monocytes. So they are very, very large cells. And if you look at the monocytes, so this is the cell, okay, monocyte. And very, very important information is what is the shape of the nucleus of the monocyte. If I look at the monocyte, the nucleus, okay, of a monocyte is what shape? Horseshoe shaped. So, which type of immune cells has a horseshoe shaped type of nucleus? Your answer should be monocytes. Okay. Now, example, another name of monocyte is macrophages. Macrophages, they look like something like this. What they do is, this is your blood vessel. These macrophages, they go out of the blood vessels and they act like police. So what do? They go near the cells, they check if they are infected, or if there is any anybody some from outside. So if there anybody from outside, what do? Imagine this is a bacteria that it comes across. It will engulf the bacteria, okay, and it will digest it. Okay, this is the engulfing of the bacteria, and it will digest it eventually. So this process of engulfing the bacteria and killing it, it is called as phagocytosis. Phagocyte, swallowing or digestion. So they are just like police. So monocytes are also called as what? Macrophages. What is their important characteristics? It is having a horseshoe shaped nucleus. Very, very important information. Are you able to follow? Are you able to understand? Yeah. Chalo.
No.
Very, very interesting thing that we will discuss today is
What?
this means balance. What is blood balance? What are we talking about blood balance? Now, if I look at a male and if I look at a female, in a female it's around, yeah, tell me. Yes. I recommend you just type your message in the chat box. That would be helpful. As I was saying, whenever there is, let's say that you have gone to play, and when you have gone to play, yeah, when you have gone to play, yeah, all right. So let's say you're playing, and while you're playing, what happens is you fall down, and when you fall down, you have opened up your tissues. Hold on, I see your message. Yeah, what happened? Yeah, some, I don't know. Probably you just cut the call. That's why. it stopped. I didn't cut the call. So the session won't end until you press the red button. Okay. Since we had two of it, probably it ended the call for both of us. Let's see. Okay. I hope you're listening to me. So chalo. So the story is simple. You're playing and you fall down and you opened up your hands or legs and the blood starts flowing. And the blood will stop flowing after a certain period of time. Now, why did it stop? Now, the stopping of blood is a very important mechanism of your body. Why? Because it helps you save a lot of blood, which is very, very precious. Correct, right? The blood is very, very precious. So that is why your body has to save the loss of blood. So to save the loss of blood, to save the blood from flowing away, so what our body does is it takes three important steps to block the damaged blood vessels. Your blood is supplied in the form of pipes, right? But we don't call them pipes, but we call them as arteries and veins, which are also called as blood vessels and blood capillaries. So when we fall down, obviously these blood vessels open up, and the blood from it starts going outside. Correct, right? The blood from it will start flowing. So now, to stop this, our body has three important mechanisms. So those are called as vascular spasm. Second one is called as platelet plug formation, and third one is called as coagulation. So it's all easy steps. I'm going to teach you in a very simple manner. Okay. Now, first one is vascular spasm. What is the meaning of vascular spasm? Now you just have to listen to me. Okay. Now, if you just take a look at your blood vessel, how does it look like, students? It's a cylindrical structure, right? So if I take a look at a blood vessel, how does it look like? It's a cylinder. So what is blood vessels made up of? Obviously, they're made up of muscle cells. Muscle cells or layers. Which one? Blood vessels. Okay, blood vessel. Now, if I talk about the what are the muscle layers, some layers are circular like this. Some layers are longitudinal, like parallel to each other. Okay. Now, the circular layers of muscles and the longitudinal layers of muscles, which called as circular muscles and longitudinal muscles, what they do is they contract. See, this is the blood vessels. Okay. Now, let's say that this is cut here. Now, what they do is this is the point of injury. Okay. This is the point of injury. When the point of injury happens, what happens to these cut blood vessels? The blood vessels, they go into a spasm. What is a spasm? See here, the blood vessel was this thick. Now it has become very thin, or the edges of this blood vessel become very pointy. That means they are trying to block the amount of blood flow by reducing its size. Okay, this is the first thing that happens. Second thing, what happens? Look here. This was the site of injury. Now look how the blood vessels have moved backward. So at the site of injury, the blood vessels, what they do is they go backward, or they just move away from the site of injury. So what happens in vascular spasm? One thing is the open blood vessels, they close. Second thing is once the blood vessels are damaged from the injury site, they move away from the injury site. So that is because of the muscles that are, or layers of muscle cells that are present in your blood vessels, which are circular muscles and longitudinal muscles. So that is the first step that happens in your body. That is called as vascular spasm. Okay. Vascular means vessels. Spasm means blocking the vessels and moving it away from your injury site. So this is called as vascular spasm. So they help in around 30 minutes of flow of blood. They can hold up to 30 minutes of loss of blood. Okay. And they are only activated when you are injured. Otherwise, they are normally functioning. Okay. Second one is formation of platelet plug. What is a plug? Now, this is a blood vessel. This is the site of injury. Now, the blood vessel is like this. Now, what happens? There should be some plug, okay, which blocks the flow of blood. So, that is done by who? Platelets. So, platelets form a thick plug at the site of opening. So, this is called as platelet plug formation. So, what happens? In your blood, if you see, the platelets are freely floating in the blood plasma, right? So, they're just freely floating. Now, what happens? You have got injured. So as you got injured, now some of the fibers. What are the fibers? Some of them are called as collagenous fibers. Okay, they're called as collagenous fibers, which are in your blood cells, and also endothelial layer. Endothelial layer means the inner layers. Okay, the inner layers and the collagen fibers, when they are exposed or when they become open to your platelets, the platelets become very, very active. How do they become active? The soft platelets, which are just flowing in your blood, they become sticky and they become spiky. What is spiky? That means like this, very rough. What is sticky? They glue together. So when platelets become sticky and spiky, one platelet to another, another platelet to another, so they start forming a huge ball. And this huge ball act like a plug. What is a plug? Plug means when your tap is flowing, you just stick something inside to stop the flow of water. Similarly, a plug is formed which is made up of platelets. Understood? So the platelet like plug formation can be increased with the addition of ADP, adenosine diphosphate. So as your adenosine diphosphate increase, the platelet starts increasing, and then they recruit more and more platelets, and the plug becomes thicker and thicker. Okay, and some of the factors also maintain the platelet plug formation. And the final method is coagulation. Coagulation is a perfect method. Coagulation is a perfect method to stop the flow of blood. This is a very, very long process, but this is a permanent process to completely seal off whatever your tissues are injured. Okay. So, how do platelet plug, how do this coagulation form? Coagulation is not just one step process, so it happens multiple steps. So to do something in multiple steps, multiple things are involved here. So these we call it as factors of coagulation, or coagulation factors, or blood clotting factors we call it as. So these factors are very, very important. If you see, the clotting factors or coagulation factors, or the process of coagulation, it is controlled by 13 different factors, students. How many? 13. So each of the factors are named as factor 1, factor 2, factor 3, and all the way it goes to factor 13. I know this. Are we supposed to remember all of this? It's a question mark. But it is so simple to map everything if you study in a proper way. But I'll give you some important things that you have to remember. When it comes to clotting factors, remember that calcium ions play a very important role when it comes to clotting your blood. Which one? Calcium ions. Remember this point, very, very important. That is calcium ions. Understood? Second thing is, always the fibrinogen is converted into fibrin. Okay, converted into fibrin. This is another important thing that you have to remember. And when you go to your class 12, you will come across this factor 9, factor 11, and factor 9, factor 11, and then you have factor 8. Sorry, and then you have your factor 8, 8, 9, 11. So these three factors you come across in your class 12. So that is why these factors have to be in your memory. So to come across coagulation, I just want you to look at this diagram. So what happens? It happens with a combination of all these factors, finally to produce one important product. What is that? See, we have to stitch everything that is damaged. So to stitch, we need fiber. We need what? Fiber. Right? So we call it as fibrinogen. Okay. So fibrinogen is inactive and it is insoluble, and it is soluble, sorry. So this fibrinogen, which is inactive fiber, has to be converted into active fibrin. So this active fibrin is like thread-like structures which integrate together so well like a mesh, so that they completely seal off whatever that is injured. Now, how do we get fibrinogen to fibrin? That happens with such a long mechanism. You can see the map of how the things are happening. So let us take a small look at it so that we understand. So somebody got injured and the tissues are exposed. So that activates factor 3. The 3 combines with 7 to give factor 7 plus 3. Finally, it gives rise to 10. The factor 10 activates the rest of the factors that leads to formation of fibrinogen to fibrin. I know that this particular topic requires a little bit of explanation. So I would like to take this topic in the next session so that we discuss slowly and calmly and then conclude this topic of coagulation of blood and blood group P. All right, students. Okay. So now, if you have any doubts in the later session, you please ask me.